If the Roman Church was so Judaic, why are their symbols, regalia, and architecture Egyptian in nature?
Yeah, because this is one of the, when people say that, hey, Michael, your books are too thick or whatever, this is one of the reasons. There's too many things to get into that people don't know. First of all, there's nothing Jewish. There's nothing Judaic about Jews. As I said, they come from Egypt. They were there as welcome guests, as visitors to the Pharaoh. They were there. The real Jew is a word that pertains to adept. Right? And it's actually Gaelic, believe it or not, when you really track it back. It has to do with tree worship. So the Levites are the Lui. That's an Irish word, Celtic word. So when you go back and find out all of these people who they were, and groups like the priesthood of the Shiloh, the priesthood of the Levites, the who's the other ones? All these different priesthoods that are mentioned. A special group around Moses or whatever, right? There's at least 3 to 4 priesthoods. On my Astrotheology's own site, I get into all of that. Well, these priesthoods were satellites of the great Western priesthoods, the Arya. They were satellites of them. They would serve them. And so these words don't belong to Judaism, and they don't belong to Christianity at all. They don't belong to anything except this one cult. And then they got appropriated, transmogrified, letters were changed, vowels were changed, and all of that. And there's so much evidence of this. That's why the books are jam-packed with it, to show how it all comes. Even the word vicar. I mean, you wouldn't believe, that when you get into Pope, Pontifex, Cardinal, right? It just goes on. Pastor, what have you, right? They're all relating back to the iconography of this particular group. But this particular group were welcome guests in Egypt, in Persia, in Babylon, in Turkey, and all around the world. And they were so loved that their iconography and emblems was adopted. Later on, you can talk about things like plagiarism, cannibalization, and theft perfectly correctly in the later days. But in the beginning, it was, give me your autograph. Are we allowed to use that? Oh yeah, you can use that, yeah. So suddenly you get these symbols that are all the same, the zodiac being one, but many other, bull, right? You see in Sumeria, Babylon, all of it are inheritances of this ancient cult. And all of religion today and all of science is to try to hide from you the existence of that cult. You'll get little anecdotes to it, like, Pythagoras made way because he was being visited by the great Scythian lord and sorcerer Abaris. All right, and nobody makes any sense of that. Even the word Abaris is a clue. And Pythagoras is visited, and Pythagoreans say, our whole school was created by this weird archer, this bowman, horse-riding bowman. And he wore long trousers, and he was a Scythian and a great archer. And he is the patron of our order, the Scythians. What's that when it's home? Or the Scythians? Or what's that? I thought they were just a bunch of barbarians from the north. No, they're the prototype of the Persian Empire. You see, and so it goes. So it's just about connecting dots. Although a lot of this sounds controversial, in my Astrotheology's own site, I point to all the eminent scholars from the top universities who confirm every word we're saying. So it sounds to a bunch of dumbasses, right? It sounds real fucking way out. No, I make a point of leading you to the great scholars, the Robert Graveses, the Mircea Eliads, right, the Gerald Masseys, who will cite the ancient texts, cite it, and show you that this is exactly that what we're talking about is not spurious.
What is the connection between Catholicism and the Egyptian sun cult?
Well, you see, as I said, what we would know now as Roman Catholicism is a sort of amalgam or hodgepodge of all the cults. So, but the solar symbolism was corrupted. Because remember, the Ammonists were solar cult, and the Atnists were solar cult. And so you have these two presences, if not more, but just to stick to these two guys, both of them are worshiping the sun. The cult of Ra, the cult of Horus, all come from one. Aten comes from another. So actually this dyad didn't change. And by the time you get up to the formation of, the Roman Catholic Church, you get a lot of funny shenanigans going on. You get deep conspiracy in the form of St. Paul and his shenanigans, because the other great discovery, talk about a connecting dot. There's never been a connecting dot like this. When Ralph Ellis comes along and tells you that Paul is Josephus Flavius, there's a dot like no other dot to be connected. So, all right, taking that, and then you have your Joseph Atwells, you've got, he's not the only one, Tony Bushby. There's a whole bunch of people who sort of understand that something took place here. And then later you had Marcion and all this, and you had this Gnosticism and Hermeticism dyad. Well, somehow when the church got formed, huge dollops of solar cultism was brought in. Also, there's a lot of cult of Mithras. In fact, the Vatican stands on a temple to Mithras and a temple to Aphrodite Venus. So it's a given. Jesus is born under the star or whatever. So the solar symbolism is there, replete. But if you follow Ralph, and I've embellished parts of his work as well to say that there was actually a fourth and fifth sect. Because before the advent of Christianity, you get rivalry within the solar cults. And it takes volumes and volumes to explain it because everybody wants proof. So, okay, then don't tell me why my books are too thick. You are the guys who said you wanted evidence and proof. Well, we're happy to supply it. So the thing is that then what we know is the fourth and the fifth sect, both solar worshippers, divide. And of course, even that it's sort of a replication of earlier divides. But by the time it comes to the historical period, you're getting the fifth sect's iteration of what it means to worship the sun. And that's where we get, your Jesus Christ and all of that, and all the things that we're familiar with, and, the Eucharist and this kind of thing. And the 12 disciples, 12 being a solar number. And then you get the fourth sect, who are sticking a little bit closer to to the Atonist world. But as the fourth sect moves into Syria and Palestine, they merge with the Jews. They're not Jews themselves, right? They merge with the people that later come to be called the Jews. And they don't merge with a whole bunch of ragtag Jews or anything. No, it's merchant level and above. They're only merging and marrying in with a very few Jews, and these are the top people, the Herods, the higher level ones. And this had happened with many tribes. Even like I said, the Egyptians had married in with those who called the Jews. It's not even the right word to use, but let's just carry on using it for now. So the Persians and the Parthians and the Egyptians had married in with very, very wealthy Jews. And by doing that, there's now going to be a change in the complexion of the solar worship. Okay? And so what we get now is this kind of weird hybrid. There are esoteric Christians, esoteric Jews, who have a completely different understanding of that worship, and they don't really include Jesus. They may still even include like Mithra or whatever, or Serapis, or Horus, what have you. It's just exactly the same kind of solar worship, but just with a sort of a different flavor. People like sprinklings, people like, Reese's peanut butter, chips on the ice cream. It's just a matter of that. It's really just the accretion down through time. And the one that we got that's really popular is but one of many forms of solar worship. It's got loads of Druidism thrown in. Doesn't mean it is Druidism, but they took a certain element of Druidism, and they took certain etymologies. So they are syncretic, as Judaism was. Now, the quickest and easiest way to say it is just pure cannibalization, because as years go by, it degenerates, and all this worship degenerated. All the cults degenerated into something almost unrecognizable as they became Hellenized, as they became Romanized, and then later on as they went to the rank and file of the people through St. Paul. It's a form of cannibalization, and therefore there's nothing Jewish about Judaism. There's nothing Masonic about Masonry, right? It all comes from somewhere else. It comes from the Hermetic mysteries, which provided an enormous sort of Aladdin's cave, a great cache of wisdom that could be just plundered ad infinitum. Think of the conquistadors attacking the Inca and the Aztec, just plundering them in their homelands, which has been done all over. Well, think of it, it's the same thing, only in intellectual terms, a great plundering of later groups who are emaciated and empty. We've been doing it ever since. And Christianity is just one of the greatest criminals. They do it better than everybody else. You know, they're more like Al Capone and the enforcer. Yeah, they do it better. Is this colonization of the mind, as opposed to a particular topography? And that's the Mission Impossible. It was done. And so now when we look at like chapter 16 in Irish Origins, volume 1 goes into this in detail. That's why every building you look at, every temple, every church, every Masonic hall, even in the pavements, in the city squares, the plazas, I don't know where, the clock towers, the church towers, it's all there in front of you in a big heap. It's just been redacted. Why do you see lions at the front of great buildings or even stately homes? Does anybody have a clue where that comes from and what it is? You know, and that those are symbols of Mithras. Those are symbols of Aton. No clue at all. Or they may be goddess symbols, you see. Because the goddess symbol, the goddess tradition must always be factored in what we're talking about. That was a hoary, ancient, tradition that also became sort of plagiarized and transformed as we go. But it was a distinct phenomenon back then. Like I said about the bull, it was almost like a supreme cult. And I talk about that. You know, it was actually called back in Egypt the Order of the Great Royal Wives. And then that was scrubbed, and we just used Dragon Court. Graham, Lawrence Gardner lets us know that it's the Dragon Court, as he calls it. You know, and I read into that. You have to get into the actual deep symbolism of the serpent, and you realize that this was a female cult. Men need not apply, except in that they were subordinates. And so then this allows you to see that all the male priesthoods from the dawn of time actually serve. They're acolytes. That's why they shave their heads. That's why they wear the clothes they do. It's all female garb. The churches are all shaped like a female. There's another cult that's completely been airbrushed from the history books. And you have to look for it, you know, as it leaves its euphemisms, leaves its numeral symbolism. And that's what the female Illuminati site and the female Illuminati program goes into, to completely overthrow. Because there's not a single person out there who talks about that. They all really do think that the world conspiracy or the elite, you know, is almost strictly a male phenomenon, and they couldn't be more wrong. You know, but that great royal wife line wasn't just actually Egyptian only. It wasn't only concentrated. It was absolutely worldwide. Every single country had branches of this group, but they were super secret. Absolutely super secret, because they used male acolytes out front. And those acolytes were sworn in those days by death to never mention who they worked for. Now, this has all been whistleblown in certain modern movies in Hollywood, actually, amazingly. It's been whistleblown. It's out there. But to put the pieces together, you know, is a life's work.
So speaking of the feminine entity, why does Christianity downplay the goddess and the feminine entity?
Well, partly for this reason that we just explained. So she'll turn up as the Queen of Sheba, Delilah, Deborah, Mother Mary, right? It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant when you look at what the hell's going on. You know, Zipporah, you know, and he fell in love with the princess of Egypt, was fishing that day and grabbed Moses out of the waters. I mean, how many cultures had that one? And how many know it's up there is the great river that the priestess takes out the little child from the river? I mean, come on. So one is because that cult was so infinitely powerful that we'd have to redefine the word powerful. There's never been a male society, no matter what they tried, and the fifth sect kind of tried it. The fifth sect was a patriarchal, patristic wing who did try to break away from this cult. They didn't really do a very good job, actually. And in recent years, there's been a lot of conversion back from, you know, what would be called the fifth sect, hard papal Pauline Christianity. Behind the scenes in the Masonic sort of lodges behind them, there's been, you know, the College of Cardinals, there's been a lot of defecting, but let's not get into that. But the idea is that this group is so powerful in a way that you couldn't, you know, when we say powerful cult, you're thinking mafia, you're thinking, you know, Palestinian PLO or the IRA. One thing that you have to understand when you start getting into this cult is you got to redefine the word powerful. These are the great sorceresses. These are the great witch cults. And when you're a member of them and when they hire you, yeah, you will do as you are told. You get a lot of goodies. You want some boys, some young girls, you know, whatever you want. Money? Ah, sure, we got no. Sure, here's some money. Like those VA vets were showing me. Here's some money with all of their symbols on it. Yeah, here you go. Here's some money. Just look at it and remember that cornucopia, that pentagram, or that, you know, moon mark or hallmark or the number 13. Just you remember who gave you that loan, and think what's going to happen to you if you ever squeal. Now you can symbolize us by all means. You know, the Merovingians with their long hair. Hey, symbolize us up the kazoo. Hold the symbol of Venus as the royal orb. Symbolize us all you want, mate, but never speak. Right? The head of the Templars, that skull that they're worshiping, turned out to be a woman. They looked at the dimensions of it. They said, that's a female skull. Well, let's back up then and ask a few more questions. And their original story about their king mating with a dragon, Merovi, and then the mother of Merovi, this water serpent. No, come on. Just go to femaleilluminati.com. It's all there. But the thing is that this is a powerful cult, and they don't let their acolytes speak. You know, you can absorb the symbolism, you can use it, yeah, but you cannot speak. It's an extraordinary thing. And it just goes back to the whole way that these cults work. And we're privy to some of it and not privy to other things that they're up to.
People have been sold the lie of salvation, and in order to earn their promissory note to enter heaven, they have to follow a man-made religion and the Bible. What are your thoughts about the psychology and brainwashing behind the Christian movement?
Yeah, wow, what a question. By the way, I just want to remark, brilliant questions that you've been sent. Just very inspiring. Well, it's all brainwashing, because consciousness has been brainwashed by this higher level priesthoods, you know, for years. And I don't care whether it was Akhenaten or something before. It's been the order of the day since the dawn of time. So what we're dealing with is a very clever priesthood, the solar one, and as we're now noticing, priesthoods, plural. Very clever, with definitive knowledge about us. Why wouldn't they brainwash us? Don't adults brainwash their children every single day? You'll believe what we tell you, we know best. Right? So hierarchies was one, after the great ancestral trauma, hierarchy, which is not evil in itself, by the way, it gets things done. So does slavery. But hierarchy was brought in as a galvanizing system in all the cultures because of this wreck and ruin that had occurred before. Then they find out this hierarchy works really good. As long as you obey the masters, you get your bowl of soup. Right? You're protected and all this. And you feel part of the crowd. You were traumatized, so you feel it's good to feel galvanized with your culture. So everything we call a Celt, a Gaul, you know, a Roman, whatever, a Visigoth, I don't know what, all the different cultures, you know, came out of the hierarchies. By being galvanized, they re-got their identities. Before, the identity of anyone called an Ionian or a Dorian or a Pelasgian or a Mycenaean or a Minoan, right? That's all latter day. That's all, you know, new gear coming out of the wash that you put on with your name on the back of it. Great number 11. Yeah, he's great. Before that, there was all different attributions and nomenclature. But hierarchy is the answer to this because it's pathological. I said there was some good things about it, but even then, the good thing about it was it responded well to a trauma. Doesn't mean it's good in itself. And ultimately, if it's taken too far, as it was in all of these later periods after the Bronze Age, it became pathological, and it's stuck to this day. It's devised by pathological thinking, and it perpetuates pathological thinking ultimately. Yeah. Scholars have shown that subjectivity, the idea that I even have an I or a subjective being within me to introspect, is completely historically recent. Well, right, then you're just like a chess piece in a box. You're like a little, a little plastic army that can be arranged on the hierarchy, and you're not going to say, you don't even have an I to say anything about it. Any comment you would have ever made back then is the same as the next guy's comment. Hail Caesar. That's about as far as it went. And if Caesar says stand on your head, you stand on your head. If he goes, those people are my enemy, go and butcher them and leave not even a child alive. All right, that's what happens. The Phoenicians, I don't like them anymore. Can you wipe them all out? Well, when you say all, Caesar, what do you mean by all? No, I mean all. You mean the children too and the animals? Yeah, all. And then with pour salt, this has actually happened, pour salt on Carthage so that nothing can grow after they're all been wiped out. That's called erasure. And in its place is a hierarchy. So they must be connected in some way. You didn't even have the I-ness to stand up and say, I don't think so. There's no Captain Kirk going, question for God. Why does God need a spaceship? There's no such thing. It's just conformity. And even the slightest sign of individual thought, you were dead. You were put in the galleys. You were put in the chain to a wall in the dungeon. So, and then as these great scholars also show you that when subjectivity did come online and the thought of independence, well, we didn't want it. So whether it was suppressed or it wasn't suppressed, man just said, I don't even want that. That's why we're here now. We are here now because when we were first given the mere modicum of individual thought, we rejected it. What do they say? I've ever seen a football match? Ever seen an arena? It was no different back when they were at the time of Caesar Augustus, the arena, as it is today. There's no difference in that. The collectivity will never end, but subjectivity and individualism, it's dying by the day. So that hierarchy and that structure and that depersonalization, which is a kind of brainwashing, right, is ubiquitous. It's been there with us all through time. And it's dissidents, it's dissenters, or you can count on one hand. So it's tragic. Back, when they're all the putting people in the wicker man, I don't know. And anyway, check out the symbolism. Here's a bit of astrotheology again. Check out the actual symbolism, like say the heraldry of modern nations or royal houses. Right? The great mythologies of the Celts, like I said, the hunt or the chase. Where the hell is all of that coming from? It's all cosmic. And so because of the hero and because of the mystery and because of the awesomeness of the zodiac and the stars, we wanted somebody to translate that to us. And that became the priest. And then the priest decides, well, look, I'm very interested in the esoteric side, but I think we're going to have to elect somebody to keep people down in a more of an autocratic way. We need that figure. All right, we'll have a thing called a king. And then we need other priests because there's this emotional side of us. Remember I said they had the definitive knowledge of us? They go, we need another group lower than us who specialize in taking care of, the emotional nonsense of these farm animals. And so we get the priesthood on the lower level that we know. So theocratic control, autocratic control, crown and gown. Then they see to their amazement, it bloody well works. It just works. So keep on wheeling out the same, horrendous juggernaut down through the ages. And behind it, just real independence is what we're doing right now. Independence is to say, what lie all behind us? And then finding out about astrotheology, sidereal mythology, and then realizing, like I did back in the 80s, every single one of the myths of my country, all the Celtic myths, can be seen as euphemisms of cosmic events, including the coming of great comets. All the mythologies. And the same can be done with Britain, like King Arthur, that sword, that lance, that chariot, that dynamic between the twins, that thing about the unfaithful woman. It's all coming from the stars. Could you believe it? Absolutely amazing. But the thing is that they knew the nature of consciousness, even back then. And one thing that is behind the question of, that it's Christian or it's religious is this. They knew that early man, this would be pre-Vedic, going back many thousands of years BC, was actually not interested in supernaturalism. This is another thing I try to bring to bear. They were very grounded, very earthy people, very practical. They did worship, but they worshipped in a different way. And so because of the cataclysm and the travesty and the trauma that it brought up, a certain bunch of incidents happened that gave rise to the priestarchy. There's actually concrete reasons. And again, this is not to be confused with my Atlantis book at this point, because I give a very strong, argument there for their arising. But there's another school that gives another account of why a priestarchy arose. And it had to do with the trauma, but it was also part of their definitive knowledge of us was to understand that there's fear. There's legitimate fear because nature is to be feared. So the practical workaday man of the ancient world who awed the universe was also in somewhat fear of it, because sometimes it acts, the real thing here, actually, when you dissect it, we don't want to do that here, is the fear of animals. It's a whole dynamic about the combat myth, what's called the combat myth, and why you see all throughout the tradition. Well, we were talking about ubiquitous symbolism, proving dispersion. One of them is the combat myth, where you see like Thor fighting the great Midgard serpent, Marduk fighting the bull and the lion, Samson in the lion's den. You had the previous Daniel in the lion's den. All of these are re-commenting on the great combat myth, right? You get it all over the world. So there is a certain fear element. It's not a bad thing. It's completely rational. Animals attack you at night and so on. So the priesthood is aware of this. Part of their definitive knowledge of us is the fear that undergirds consciousness. When the cataclysm came about, this fear element ramped up. So the authors who only talk about animal fear are mouths off. They're brilliant people, but they miss this piece. The fear is already there. It's meant to be there. It's part of our ancestral, makeup. But when the great cataclysm come, it was like, fear squared. Fear now became a very dominant part of our consciousness, and that is what left us open then to manipulation of the kind that you're talking about.
Would there be any Christian religion without Catholicism?
What a question. These are great. Yes, because it already was there in potentia in what they call the monotheism of, say, Akhenaten, and of course the ominous cult, as I'm saying, they were Christians. They worshipped everything that Christianity is doing under different guise. Mithraism. There was cults in Ireland of the sun that almost replicate, they had the wicker man as the crucified being and all of this. And there would have been, because remember, Christianity now, as we've explained it, is just one manifestation of the great signs in the sky and the priesthoods and cults that then arrange themselves to, to codify the great symbolic archive in the sky. So Christianity has its God in the sky. And through the Bible are references to the sky. And all through mythology, right? Hercules and the 12 tribes, Christianity's Moses going through the wilderness experience, Jesus going through the wilderness experience, Jesus dying on Calvary on the cross. Do you realize that every single symbol, and I mean every one of them that turns up in the great scriptures of the world, Christian and other, comes from that event? If you read the book of Job, it's all about the comet. The gnashing of the teeth in the book of Revelation. Yep, comet. The dragon, 666, is the comet. Or if it's not the freaking comet, it's the signs in the sky, but we don't know that the signs in the sky wasn't precipitated by the comet's entrance, that suddenly this weird conjunction with other, planetary bodies take place. It really doesn't matter. They were both historical events. They both changed the face of the earth, and they both gave rise to the first temples. Before that, there was only towers. These round towers actually exist in Ireland. They call them Christian. They're not. They're found all over the planet, and they were for the stellar cult to go up and study the stars. That's about the first temple that you could imagine. It was a tower. And guess how many platforms there are within the tower? 7, because it's a stellar cult. So 7 chakras. Remember them? You wouldn't believe how it's all got cannibalized and hybridized. And if you don't know the symbol, you're into it. You don't know that that's and isn't an animal figure associated with each of the chakras, bozo? And don't you know your Hinduism and all the iconography of your how many gods you've got come from the 88 constellations? Oh, well, gosh, no, we don't know anything about that. But as your personal story, we talked in the precast, and we'll have you on Slave to talk about. There's a few people out there that, know better. Yeah, but again, very few. And then it's great on the person who comes to them to say, yes, I will take it on. I'll explain how these royalties nicked it, using it against you. Because remember, what also came with the temples is the priesthood, and came, as we've said, the fear. The fear is a psychological phenomenon we have in our heads, but it's been misused ever since by the holy ones from up there. And you know what they were? We'll just translate that. We're here to keep the scrolls. That's how writing and symbolism began. You used to do it on clay on the walls of the temple. Then they start writing it down on parchment with papyrus leaves. They needed the interpretation of those heavenly events became such a vast enterprise on the banks of Egypt that they had to have it, all the nomes, the 7 different temples and their satellite temples were all dedicated to exactly what I'm saying. You want to understand, the world? And so Thailand had it, everybody had it, Babylon had it. What do you think it means? Well, I don't know. And then the star, the 8-pointed star, 7-pointed star, the wings, the great wings and the orb and the serpents around it, that was seen in the sky. Arthur pulling the sword. I don't know what you've got. A great man appearing out of a cloudburst, like I said, the Medusa's head. All of it. Durga riding the tiger, all of it. And then what happened is, as this information got transmitted and started to get written down, certain symbols stood out and the interpretation stood out. So the cult went, hey, that's special. We're going to use that for ourselves. We like that. The lion, oh, that's great. And then another goes, no, the unicorn, that's great. So then they all start to get what's known as tutelary or totemic symbolism. And so when Albert Churchward or Gerald Massey start going in physically, to study the various different totemic symbols of various tribes, that's what you're getting. It's already been collated. It's like, the dragon, the serpent, yeah, we've had that. Our forefathers had that years ago. You see, it's already sort of consolidated by this time. And therefore, Westerners can come in and go, hey, you guys, worship this giant locust, tell us all about that. And so all of that symbolism then animates and permeates the religions of the world. That's where to find it. The religions of the world, because we've had that as a theme here. Yes, it's astrotheological, but now we're explaining what that really means when you unpack it. All the symbols that permeated through all of Europe and you find the ship, even the great ship. I don't care what you've got. I list them all. The Mayat's feather. I list them all in that article. And then I note, because it's the heart of my female Illuminati thesis, that when we spoke earlier of, the great royal wives or the daughters of Akhenaten, these are a priesthood because they showed excellence in translating those symbols, and it had to be acknowledged that a lot of their, and all they are is interpretations, but they were better. So much so that they were actually sort of permitted or allowed to form their own cults, which would then generate. And that's how you get your Roman Sibyls, as they're called, the Sibylline oracles, and your oracles at Delphi. These female cults that nobody wants to speak about. It's how you get the Vestal Virgins of Rome. It's how you get the, what they call the Shidor of the Norse. It's how you get your Morgan Le Fay doing whatever they're doing, right? They were interpreters, but they gained so much power because of being interpreters. They gained the power of priest class. They became a priestess class of their own. And then my work is unique because it tracks their foul history, their degenerate history, right up to Madonna and Lady Gaga and all the others in between. They're not gone. That lovely Mrs. Abramovich that creates that such gorgeous artwork, isn't she just magnificent? Oh, any more you want to add to the list? Do you know where they come from, who they are? You think it's all gone? That her artwork doesn't symbolize anything, it's just slop? They're working on you back here, buddy. The fucking, these Oprah Winfreys, they got you. You have no clue where they come from and who they are. That Medusa, that thing. And if she dies and goes down there, there'll be another one. We got that Rhonda Byrne. Everybody followed her in their millions. Yeah. Plonkers, fruitcakes. They don't even know how to decode any of this, the secret. That secret comes from secretion. Women secrete. Women who had the cult of interpretation. right? So she can sell you a book beautifully bound to throw back, because the books like that existed. The Sibylline oracles are parchments and books. All the cults kept these books full of symbols. So today, and they're called grimoires. And they were dedicated to the female. That's why they had a big fat pentagram on the front. And there were books of interpretation. The Christian church tried to get rid of them. They're all down in the Vatican Center. They're under the ground. Yep. They got rid of them all right. Start reading them themselves. That's why they're dressed in female garb. That's why everything to do with the Roman Catholic Church is female symbolism. Spent a whole lifetime going through it. So they just nicked all that stuff. But that cult hasn't gone anywhere. Why would it? It was incredibly powerful and fabulously wealthy. Because out of the interpretation of those heavenly symbols came divination. Look into astrology is one thing. That's just for the king, mate. He wants to know when to, attack or when to have a ceremony. That's for the king, mate. That's not for you. How did it become useful for everybody else? How did divination? It was only the Caesar. The only person who ever had a reading in the whole of Rome was the Caesar. Later it became rich merchants, and later it became this, and then later it became, love cards and 1-900 numbers, lines. Yep. How did it get there? Well, this is this aristocratic thing that finally, but the cult was so wealthy because of interpretation. And it's not therefore by accident that a great deal of the New Age palm readers and the 1-800 number lines and all are women. They're top heavy. People ridicule that. It's just no. There's a reason why women are top heavy in the New Age movement. So you got to know these things. It's not for men. Men tried to interpret and it collapsed. Women's interpretation became important. So the lunar cult, right? All of the cults that you could consider female, they're not gone. Their high priestesses still exist, and they're still controlling your mind to the point the control is so ubiquitous that women, sure, it's all sugars and spice and all that's nice, right? That's called mind control, mate. You know nothing about the criminal history? No, because the mind control is absolutely ubiquitous. You're under the cult of mystique. And the Templars, all of these other male groups are merely their acolytes. Go to the female Illuminati and click on the first article and start reading. Don't believe me.
Michael Tsarion, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.